Hey, Coach Tim here with another training goal sabotage entry from my broad scope, narrow focus blog. I hope the series has been useful in some way to you and insightful enough in helping you gain a better platform from which to set your fitness and training goals. The topic of this last entry to the series is training for race day. The presumption is that it is endurance based training for running, cycling, triathlon, etc. Training for an adventure race or obstacle based race like the Warrior Dash or Spartan requires a completely different approach. So, this is devoted to the common endurance sports. For simplicity's sake, I will be speaking mostly from a running standpoint, but you should know that these principles carry over to any other endurance based sport equally. Thank you for giving this a listen and be sure to take these principles to heart. So, you have a distance and pace goal. Now what? Whether it is a race you're preparing for or a self made goal, you form a picture in your head of how you want to perform and to what end. This picture is based on where you have been, where you are now, and predicting where you will be. But the journey to that idealized version of yourself on race day has many factors and require a lot of things to fall in line and go according to plan. So, what if, for the sake of your time, resources, psyche, and current perception of completion, you take a step back and vet your goals again? Just put them through the ringer. Maybe you could come up with something equally meaningful that is better for you long term and frees up other life resources. Or maybe you have the right goal, but the wrong training plan and or mindset. I'm going to walk you through both of those scenarios while helping you avoid those common sabotages and pitfalls. Again, as is the case with the others, this is a shallow dive into deep waters. There are exceptions everywhere, but I'm just going to stick with these larger truths for now. So here we go. Sabotage 1: weak mental fitness. Physical fitness is obviously an important end goal that we tend to focus on with training, but mental fitness is often overlooked, and it is the primary reason goals are not reached. Mental fitness can be defined as the collective skills and mechanisms that can help overcome adversity and setbacks. Basically, it's your head game. Very rarely is a life changing goal or experience reached without some form of mental toughness. Symptoms of weak mental fitness include a pace that has not improved despite long hours of training, weekly mileage has not increased, constantly reverting to the same baseline in between races, and rarely achieving pace goals. Some may say this is due to faulty training. I say it is more mental, being too comfortable with what you know and hesitating to do the work of increasing volume and speed for fear of being injured or simply the pain of working hard. It's not comfortable to get stronger. That comes down to mental fitness. But the biggest symptom of mental weakness is mishandling setbacks and lacking the ability to re inspire yourself and restore motivation. Much of this can be avoided with planning. Build in secondary goals if something happens. Expect and be okay with a drop in performance after spring break. It happens. Seek situations that you help push you out of your comfort zone. Join a group. Seek out a new training plan that builds in more speed work. Do something. Mentally fit athletes look towards what they can control and ultimately seek out workarounds that will mitigate any subsequent drop in performance due to time off. Take an honest look at your mental fitness. As it stands now, does it live or does it jive with your current goal? Are your what ifs walking a razor's edge? The first step to building mental fitness is to visualize your mindset when things don't go according to plan and building a contingency plan for any such situation. Sabotage 2: poor goal setting. I really could have named this one faulty time expectations. In my opinion, goals usually fall apart due to the misperception of time, both in terms of whether your goal is actually worth the time invested, which I'll go over as part of my next sabotage, and the faulty assumption of the training timeline itself. Many of those prepping for long distance events, and I'm speaking from my own experience and many runners I've coached, they tend to apply faulty logic to their expected timeline of achieving a distance goal or pace goal. What's funny is that I see this almost as much in those training for a distance they've already done before and who should know better. But it is so easy to view training on linear terms when extrapolating out prep time needed for shorter events. There are several reasons this is a mistake. Biggest of all is the X factor of time under tension for the soft tissues that throws a literal curve into the training timelines. So the longer the time that you spend putting all those forces through the joints, it wears them down more than what you experience on the shorter events. That goes for running and cycling. Cycling is can you be over in proper position, like bent over the handlebars in proper position for a long time? That plays a huge role over the how strong your legs are. So, a strong pace and sound technique over shorter distances can give that false illusion of performance over long distances. But the joints, ligaments, and muscles, both active and stabilizing, along with the mental fortitude, all play a huge factor, not only on race day, but on all training days leading up to it. And this causes a time-crunched goal. And the cascading effect of a time-crunched goal is that it forces misappropriated increases on volume, often requiring an increase in frequency and miles, or a double progression that soft tissues cannot keep up with long term. I believe you should have at least, in terms of running, you should have at least 2 to 3 successful 5Ks before moving up to the 10K, which you should do a few times before moving up to the 25K or half marathon, and then perform several of those before moving up to the full. And that's the hardest jump to make. But those intermediate distances will serve as a bit of a taste of how your body's tissues will tolerate a long distance race. So if you've run a 5K or 10K, I would caution you from wanting to jump to that marathon. Just a side story about this. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine decided to take up running and to train for a marathon right out of the gate. He was naturally a good runner, and his pace progressed fast. I would say well above average. But he got too fast for his own good, and he was eyeing a sub 320 marathon based on his longest runs of 16 miles. Keep in mind that's 10 miles short of race day. But on race day, he crashed after, guess what, 16 miles, and he could barely finish the race. He had a miserable experience. His time was just over 4 hours. It's because he undervalued time. Just because you can perform well on a shorter distance does not mean it will extrapolate out to the long distance. So don't make that same mistake. Build in more time than you think you need. Sabotage 3. Valuing distance over pace. Think back again to your big picture. What is the ultimate why behind your goal? Are you choosing a goal based on what others are doing? Are you considering the time it will take to train for that full or half Ironman or full marathon? What other hobbies or time spent with your family are you willing to part with in pursuit of this goal? Additionally, what exposure are you putting on yourself for injury and setbacks? Consider for a moment the 10K, or whatever a short to middle distance is in your sport. The sprint triathlon is another great one. I believe that those are the best distances. After all of my years of endurance sports, I have come to fall in love with those middle distances. I am more impressed with those who can run a fast 10K relative to their typical pace than someone who trained for months and months and months just to trudge and crawl across the finish line of a marathon in a sweaty and often bloody pulp. Yes, it is a big accomplishment to traverse that distance. But keep in mind, I'm talking about this from a fitness, performance, and life balance background. I think there's too much stigma or emphasis attached to distance covered than pace achieved in shorter runs. I value pace and performance over the net distance covered because to me it's the difference between logging endless miles on the weekend over doing 30 minutes of speed work and pacing. To me, it's just as impressive, if not more impressive, than covering a long distance. A strong pace indicates good technique, is more functional, caters to better strengthening, and has better carryover to other areas of fitness. And it also leaves a ton more time for other types of training throughout the week. This is not to say you shouldn't have longer distance goals, just be careful about investing a lot of physical and emotional effort in a goal that is more likely to invite injury and burnout. And just make sure you're not choosing a distance goal just because it's so prevalent in our race culture, to where even a marathon is considered like a middle distance run with all the ultras out there. Further, you must be sure you have proper form, physiology, experience, and adequate supporting resources like time. For me, I found much more value in hitting the 45 or 43-minute 10K, and I don't need to spend so much time worrying about on-course nutrition. I get my weekends back. I have more free time. If you think further distances is a key to your weight loss, there are many reasons to think again. Listen to my weight loss sabotage entry from a few weeks ago. Just in general, make sure your long distance race is worth it to you. Sabotage 4. Getting caught in the Zone 3 trap. This is in reference to the heart rate zone training as categorized in this chart. Anyone who's ever followed a training program is probably familiar with how these zones break down. They're basically percentage of current maximum heart rate. Zones 1 and 2 are generally for recovery and endurance-based training. Zones 4 to 6 are typically targeted for building up threshold capacity and strength using longer sustained intervals with built-in rest. Zone 7 is your 30-second power, like your max power that you can sustain for that 20 to 30-second time frame. Very heavy volume. And then there's Zone 3. Zone 3 represents race day intensity, depending on the event, of course, but it is the maximum amount of power that can be maintained for your target distance. Think time trial effort or tempo effort. It's the intensity that is sustainable only with grit and determination. Throughout the race, you might have a pacing strategy that fluctuates, but in essence, Zone 3 covers that set distance as fast as possible without needing to stop. This is great for race day. It's what we train for, but it's not so great for training itself. Here's why. Zone 3 is your classic gray area. It is not hard enough or intense enough to elicit desirable physical adaptations, but it's too hard to allow for day-to-day recovery. So for the benefits that you get, it's too tough on your tissues and leads to burnout a lot quicker. This sabotage I could just as easily call the average pace ego sabotage. Many endurance athletes get caught in this trap because they're afraid of seeing a slower pace on their watch, as in the Zone 2 base training. But they are also hesitant to do the hard work of developing the top end speed zones of 4 to 5. So their best compromise is to spend a ton of time in between in Zone 3. But constantly pushing in Zone 3 day after day is the habit of the time-crunched athlete, where mileage and average pace are the only validators of training. This athlete can often find themselves in a rut and left wondering how they could work so hard for such little results. As I mentioned earlier, continual Zone 3 work doesn't allow for enough recovery, puts the athlete in a state of continuous fatigue. The idea behind zone training is to create that intentional disparity. You want to keep your easy days easy, your hard days hard, limit the tempo and the time trial efforts of Zone 3 to once or maybe even once every 2 weeks. The benefits for speed, lactate endurance, and metabolism are maximized when you're doing top end zone 4 and zone 5 work. This is where you become efficient at mitigating lactic acid. This is where you become more efficient at burning carbs and thereby reaching your optimal performance. If any of these sabotages hit close to home with you, you might consider setting up some time with me where we can go over your program. I've helped coach many runners and cyclists to their optimal race day, and it is important to know how and when to push and when to pull back in order for performance to go up on race day. Reach out to me directly, or you can go through the fitness facility email as stated here. For now, make sure to take these tips to heart and then take action. Bye for now.